Have you ever felt confused, as if your decisions or emotions were being shaped by someone else without you realizing it? Phrases like, "My ex always used to do that, but you never do," may seem harmless at first glance, until you start to notice something strange. Those words subtly guide you, creating expectations you didn't even know existed. If this resonates with you, know that you are not alone. Many people who have been through toxic relationships have experienced this sense of invisible control, where the narcissist uses indirect tactics to manipulate your behavior and emotions. In this video, we will explore how emotional control happens and how to identify these tactics before they cause even more damage. This is an invitation to clearly see what once seemed invisible. Take a deep breath and get ready to take an important step toward your well-being. Hello, I'm Lauren Mitchell. My mission is to show you that you were never the problem. If this content resonates with you, like the video and subscribe to our channel. Let's start by understanding what indirect manipulation is. Indirect manipulation is one of the most subtle and dangerous tools used by narcissists to shape the behavior of their victims without them realizing it. This tactic involves the use of veiled suggestions, comparisons with third parties, and implicit expectations that gradually condition the person to act according to the manipulator's desires. In the book Psychopath Free, this dynamic is explored in detail, revealing how toxic individuals carefully construct narratives to maintain emotional control over their partners. Imagine hearing phrases like, "My ex always used to do that, but you never do," or "You're so much more understanding." At first glance, it might seem like a compliment, right? In reality, those words carry disguised expectations. By comparing you to someone else, the narcissist is indirectly stating how they expect you to behave. This creates invisible pressure for you to fit into the idealized mold they've created, avoiding any action that might trigger rejection or abandonment. This form of persuasion works because it directly targets your need for acceptance and approval. When someone you love points out something positive about you, it's natural to want to maintain that standard. But at the same time, you begin to avoid certain behaviors, even if they are healthy or natural, just to not become like the ex. This process is slow and insidious, making it difficult to identify when and how it began. The impact of this manipulation goes beyond behavior. It deeply affects your self-esteem, confidence, and even your perception of reality. You may start doubting your own choices, questioning whether you're doing something wrong or if you deserve to be loved for who you truly are. This feeling of being trapped in an invisible web is exactly the narcissist's goal: to maintain control while keeping up the illusion of innocence. Now, how does indirect manipulation work in practice? Indirect manipulation doesn't happen explicitly, but rather through small suggestions and comparisons that seem harmless at first glance. For example, when we hear phrases like, "My ex always used to fight with me, but we never fight," or "My ex was so clingy, but you're so independent," it might sound like a compliment. However, what's implied in those words goes much deeper than it appears. These statements create clear expectations about how you should behave to continue being valued or loved by that person. The problem is that these expectations are not communicated directly. Instead, the narcissist uses comparisons and stories about past relationships to shape your perception of what is acceptable or desirable. When they say something like, "My ex always pressured me to get a job, but you're so understanding," they are actually guiding you to avoid any kind of demand or expectation in the future. This creates invisible pressure for you to adapt to the idealized mold they've created, even if it goes against your own needs or desires. Another common example is the use of feigned vulnerability. A narcissist might share stories about how they were abandoned in the past, saying things like, "Everyone always leaves me, so I'm afraid you'll leave too." While this may seem like a sincere confession, it's actually a way to condition your behavior. When you hear this repeatedly, you start to feel an unconscious responsibility to remain loyal, avoiding any actions that might trigger abandonment. This causes you to suppress your own emotions and needs to maintain harmony. These tactics can be even more insidious because we often don't realize their immediate impact. You may slowly start changing your behavior without even noticing that you're doing it to please the other person. For example, you might avoid questioning certain attitudes or even delay important decisions. like looking for a job or setting clear boundaries just to not be negatively compared to the ex-partner. This gradual conformity process ends up creating a dynamic where your authenticity is compromised. This strategy works because it directly targets our insecurities and emotional needs. We all want to be loved and accepted for who we are. And when someone suggests that we're better than someone else, it's natural to want to maintain that status. However, in doing so, we distance ourselves further from who we really are, fitting into a pattern imposed by the manipulator. The result is a growing sense of disconnection from yourself, something we only notice when we're already deeply entangled in this dynamic. Now let's understand the role of grooming in narcissistic control. Grooming is one of the most insidious tools used by narcissists to create emotional dependency and loyalty in their partners. This technique involves a gradual process of manipulation, where the narcissist presents feigned vulnerabilities or carefully selected stories to shape how you perceive them and the relationship. By sharing these stories, often about past relationships or personal traumas, they create an image of themselves as helpless victims, evoking empathy and compassion. For example, a narcissist might say something like, "Everyone always abandoned me in the past," or "My ex was controlling and jealous." While this may seem like a sincere confession, it's actually a way to condition your behavior. When they repeat these narratives, they are subtly guiding you to avoid any actions that could be associated with abandonment or control. This creates invisible pressure for you to remain loyal, avoiding questioning their actions or decisions. This dynamic works because it directly targets our emotional needs for connection and acceptance. When someone shares their vulnerabilities with us, it's natural to want to protect them and offer support. However, over time, this sense of responsibility grows and begins to impact your own needs and boundaries. You may find yourself suppressing your emotions or delaying important decisions just to maintain harmony. Additionally, grooming serves to establish clear expectations about how you should behave within the relationship. If the narcissist says they were hurt in the past, you may begin to feel that any deviation from these expectations will result in rejection or punishment. This fear of losing the emotional bond ends up trapping you even more in the abusive dynamic, even if you don't immediately realize it. The key to identifying this pattern lies in observing how these stories are repeatedly used to shape your behavior. When you start noticing that you're changing who you really are to fit into the idealized mold created by the other person, it's a clear sign that grooming is in action. And what are the warning signs when identifying control tactics? Identifying the control tactics used by narcissists can be challenging, especially because they are subtle and often disguised as compliments or concern. However, there are clear patterns that can help you recognize these dynamics before they cause even more damage. One of the most common signs is the use of comparisons with ex-partners, such as "my ex was so clingy" or "my ex never supported me." While it may seem like a compliment at first glance, these phrases carry implicit expectations about how you should behave to maintain the relationship. Another sign is feigned vulnerability. Narcissists often share stories about trauma or abandonment in the past, saying things like, "Everyone always left me," or "I just want someone who understands me." These statements create an illusion of emotional closeness, but in reality, they are a way to condition your behavior. They want you to feel responsible for their happiness and avoid any actions that might hurt their feelings. This technique makes you suppress your own needs to maintain harmony. Additionally, pay attention to how the narcissist uses veiled criticism. Phrases like "you're so independent" may seem positive, but are actually setting boundaries about what is acceptable. Any deviation from these expectations can result in emotional punishment, such as silence or cutting remarks. These reactions serve as constant reminders that you need to act according to the idealized mold they've created. To identify these tactics, trust your intuition. If something feels strange or out of place, it probably is. Ask yourself, is this person really supporting me, or are they just shaping my behavior? By developing this awareness, you'll be better prepared to set healthy boundaries and protect your authenticity. And why is it so hard to see this control as it happens? Indirect manipulation is intentionally designed to be invisible, and that's exactly why many people only realize what happened after they're out of the relationship. Narcissists are masters at maintaining their mask of innocence while planting subtle expectations in the minds of their victims. They use carefully constructed stories and disguised comparisons to shape your behavior without you even realizing it. Moreover, our own need for acceptance and approval plays a crucial role in this process. When someone praises us or makes us feel special, it's natural to want to meet those expectations. In the moment, everything seems to make sense. You're just trying to be a better, more understanding, or more loyal person. Only later, when looking back, do we begin to see how harmful these dynamics were. This lack of clarity doesn't mean you were naive or unable to see it. It means you were dealing with someone whose goal was to deliberately obscure the truth. Knowledge about narcissism and emotional manipulation is a powerful tool, but it only becomes accessible when we're ready to learn. So, if today you're able to identify these patterns, it's a sign of growth, not failure. Breaking the cycle of emotional control requires awareness, practice, and most importantly, specific actions to rebuild your autonomy and confidence. The first step is learning to set clear boundaries and communicate them assertively. Boundaries are not just about saying no, they are a way to protect your emotional energy and ensure that your needs are respected. For example, if someone tries to compare you to another person or makes comments that seem manipulative, it may be helpful to respond by saying, "This makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't want to talk about this." This clarity helps interrupt the pattern of manipulation before it progresses. Another powerful tool is working on self-validation. During an abusive relationship, we often neglect our own emotions and intuition to please the other person. Now is the time to reverse that. Whenever something feels wrong or uncomfortable, listen to your inner voice. Ask yourself, what do I really need at this moment? Or, how can I prioritize my well-being here? This process of self-reflection strengthens your connection with yourself and reduces dependence on external validation. Finally, practice self-care daily. This includes activities that nurture your mind, body, and spirit, such as meditation, physical exercise, or hobbies that bring genuine joy. When you invest in yourself, you begin to heal the emotional scars left by the abuse. Remember, healing is not linear, but every small step counts. Be kind to yourself along the way and celebrate every bit of progress, no matter how small. Regaining your emotional freedom after a relationship marked by indirect manipulation requires more than just identifying the tactics used by the narcissist. It's about rebuilding your personal narrative and learning to trust yourself again. The first step is shifting your mindset. You are not a helpless victim, but rather a resilient survivor who is taking control of your life. This change begins when you stop blaming yourself for what happened in the past. Those decisions that seemed wrong at the time, they were based on the information and emotions you had at that moment. There was no way to predict or fully understand the malice behind the manipulator's actions. Additionally, it's important to work on the emotional scars left by the abuse. This may include feelings of guilt, self-criticism, or doubts about your own worth. A powerful practice in this process is self-affirmation. Repeating phrases like, "I deserve to be loved for who I am," or "My needs are just as important as anyone else's," helps reprogram negative beliefs internalized during the relationship. Another valuable tool is seeking support in survivor communities, as mentioned earlier. Sharing your experiences with people who truly understand what you've been through can significantly accelerate your healing. Building healthy relationships in the future also depends on setting clear boundaries from the start. Learning to say no without guilt and prioritizing your own happiness is essential to avoiding repetitive patterns of abuse. When you enter a new relationship with self-confidence and clarity about who you truly are, it becomes much harder for someone to try to mold you again. Remember, you have the right to live free of emotional control and to create bonds based on mutual respect and open communication. If anything discussed here resonated with you, know that your voice matters. Leave your experiences or reflections in the comments. Sharing your story can help others feel less alone on this journey. Toxic relationships are more common than we think, and together we can create a space of support and understanding. Check out another one of our videos by clicking on the screen. I'll see you in the next video, and remember, you are light. Never forget to shine.